This is Mary from Mary's Eclectic Interests. Have you ever wondered what it was like to publish a newspaper with equipment from the 1930s? I have. I've always found the Minnesota State Fair Newspaper Museum a wonder of the past. Before the Minnesota State Fair opened, we were granted permission to interview those wonderful volunteers printing a 4-page newspaper, First Amendment posters, bookmarks, and the Benjamin Franklin business cards. Not only are they free, but they are being printed, cut, and created right in front of you. Take it from here, Richard.
Welcome to the 2019 Minnesota State Fair. I'm Richard A. Claddy here with Mary's Eclectic Interests. Please tell us a little bit about this historic facility here.
Hi, my name is Michelle Leonard. I am the coordinator here at the Minnesota Newspaper Museum. The museum has been on the Minnesota State Fairgrounds since 1987. We were originally built in Heritage Square. It was a replica of a newspaper office that was located in Maynard, Minnesota. The newspaper office down in Maynard was closing, and they were getting rid of all of their older equipment because everybody was going to computers in those days. And so the owners worked with the Minnesota Newspaper Association to they wanted to donate the equipment so that they could have a museum to explain how newspapers were made in the 1930s. So our museum is kind of emulant of a 1930s era newspaper museum or newspaper office.
And you actually have people that are working these actual machines from that era.
Yes. And we produce a 4-page newspaper every year called the Maynard News because it's that was kind of the deal with getting the equipment.
So they're keeping that alive.
We absolutely. And people come in and they ask us, why do you call it the Maynard News? Because there's actually a town in Minnesota called Maynard. And we do have a volunteer from Maynard too, by the way. When someone comes into the museum, they'll usually start over in this corner here where the linotypes are, and then they'll move through all of the process. You go from the linotypes, and I'll have somebody else explain how the linotypes work and how the slugs are made. But then they move into the composition area, and then we have a 1910-ish Mealy flatbed press that we'll also be able to demonstrate in a little bit. And that would be a typical process from the linotype, setting the type, the proofreading, setting the composition, moving it over onto the press, and eventually in the far back corner we have a little folder because nobody wanted to fold them by hands even back then.
You are located right here in the 4-H building here?
We are in the 4-H building. We were relocated in 2013 as preparations were made for the West End Market project that replaced Heritage Square. This location has been very fruitful and very, it's just been a good spot for us. We have the National Guard next to us. We have 4-H on the other side. And this is a very family-friendly area.
Excellent.
And so that is a nice draw for kids. The thing that we tick with is that these are big, crazy machines.
Sure.
Everybody knows cell phones, they know computers, they know tablets. But this stuff over here, this is the cool stuff. And kids would stay here much longer if their parents would let them.
You've got the whole atmosphere here. You've recreated it all here.
Absolutely. I was in newspaper for 22 years myself as a reporter, and my years here, first as a volunteer and then doing whatever it is I do around here now. I think it's controlling the madness.
You got to be a jack of all trades.
I really am. I can't run any of these machines, but I got great people that can. But it really gives me an appreciation for what my predecessors had to do to produce news and their dedication. We've been working on 4 pages for 2 weeks already, and we'll get that rolling in a couple of days. Now, other publications in the 30s and 40s, 50s, even up to the 60s and 70s, they were doing weekly publications, and I have no idea how they got those on.
Years and years of experience.
I guess.
You see those old movies where the papers are flying over the ceiling, they're coming down, and flash headlines, they throw it in the back of the truck, they take it downtown, throw it on the sidewalk, the little kid comes up, rips it open, what, they're selling for like a nickel or something. Those were the days.
I know.
People don't understand what we've lost.
I know. The only thing I can't find myself for volunteers are the kids to run around and hand out the paper during the fair.
Well, that's a good question I got for you. Back when the computers, computer age, big time in the 80s, big jump, newspapers were starting to fold up or being, bought up, big conglomerates. Do you have any, people are still wondering, how come there are newspapers? It's amazing that we actually do have a daily newspaper here in the Twin Cities. We have the Minneapolis Tribune, and in St. Paul, of course, the Pioneer Press.
Yes, and as is no real big secret to anyone, newspapers are it's a different era for newspaper now. The advent of the internet, and everybody, we all wanted to get it out there first. There's so many avenues that people can get information from. You start just open Google, and you have a slew of things that aren't even relevant to you. But the really important thing is, and the thing that you can rely on with newspaper, is that it's an ink. So they're not making it up. There will
a document there.
Right.
There's something you can hold in your hand.
The internet can offer a lot of places to find information, but the internet also doesn't give you that opportunity to. The internet isn't at your city's council meeting. The internet is not telling you why there's a SWAT team in your neighbor's backyard. Oh, excuse me. No. The internet is, for as much good as the internet can do in disseminating information, newspapers are really the thing that keeps it. And I believe their original intent was to keep residents informed of what was important in their areas.
So there is still a role for
there absolutely is. It's becoming more of a struggle for community publications in particular. The publication that I spent most of my career in just closed on August 1st.
Wow.
And that was a tough day.
That was a tough day. Well, we want to meet some of your trusted employees here. Are they volunteers during the state fair?
Well, with us today, I have a couple of volunteers and a couple more of our staff. Because this is, typically I have about 80 volunteers, and I know that I have 165 volunteer slots filled for the fair. So,
is this place just open during the state fair?
Okay. Yep. We are only open during the state fair. Understandably, a lot of our volunteers like to come in and play during the summer while we're prepping, but
just to get their hands on those old classic machines.
But we have a couple of our shift managers that are with us.
Well, let's go meet them. All right, John, maybe give me a little more information on newspapers, how the shop worked. There's like 2 distinct operations going on?
Yes. Each small-town newspaper had the side where they printed the newspaper. They also had the other side that did job work for the community. We would do business cards, letterhead, stationery, items like that, to help supplement the income of the newspaper.
All right, now I'm here with John Drew, and you're going to show us a little mini press.
This here is a hobby press. Back in the day when this newspaper was running, graphic arts was taught in high school. And So this is a little press that pre-high schoolers would get. Kids 10 to 15 would get a little press like this, and they would set it up. They'd get a few fonts of type. They'd set it up. They'd print off little business cards for themselves, or maybe if they were entrepreneurial, they would print up little business cards for some of the neighborhood businesses. But it prints little cards, very small form. So this is a press that kids would have, and they'd play around with it before they got to high school and actually took the real printing class.
How old is this model?
This is about a 1940s, a Sigwald press. That's how I got my start. My brother took graphic arts ahead of me, and so when I was in 5th grade, I learned to handset type.
You could have your own little press at home.
We did. We had a little print shop in our basement, you know.
So you got the hang of this, and then you worked your way up to the big time, the big presses.
I got in high school, and I knew my California job case, and so the first thing the teacher did was hand out a blank California job case and tell us, the kids, this is your first test. You have to learn it and then fill it out, and I took that test right away. So
excellent.
So I passed, and in 7th grade, I was a little printer's devil, is what they call the little printers.
So you've been involved with printing all your life then?
Ever since I was 12 or 13.
Excellent. So you've seen all these big changes and...
Seen it all, know nothing.
What's the future of these presses?
Young artists now, these are very desirable for young artists to have.
Excellent.
A press this size, what do you think this would cost?
Oh, $2,000.
Wrong. About $500, but there's some larger ones that are tabletop presses that sell for about $3,000.
That's what I was thinking of.
I'll sell you one tomorrow if you want it.
All right, we'll work on that. But yeah, so still this is alive and well and very coveted by artists, and it's excellent. Okay, well, let's go look at a little bit bigger machine and work our way up.
Woohoo!
John, what do we have here?
What we have is a chart showing the proper lay for the California job case. California job case on the right-hand side has the capital letters and some various punctuation and such. And on the right-hand side are the lowercase letters. Back in the day, these cases were on a slant table like this, and the lowercase would be here, and the uppercase would be up on top. That's where the upper and lowercase comes from. The California job case combined those, and the smaller letters are in this case, and they're set up, it looks like they're set up just randomly, but actually they're set up by the letters that are used the most. When you're hand setting type, you hand set them one letter at a time into the composing stick. And back in the day, they didn't know anything about carpal tunnel syndrome, but they sure knew their hands got tired when you're reaching way far out to get an E. So they put the California job case where the most used letters are in the center, so your hand doesn't travel as much. Because these guys back in the day were typesetting probably for 10 to 12 hours a day, 5 days a week. And so
it was labor intensive.
It was not a fun job to have.
Well, how long back does this go? Do you have any idea?
400 years when Gutenberg invented movable type.
Right.
So this stuff was used up until the 1960s, 1970s, and letterpress is making a comeback today with the young artists, as you saw, Morgan on the press, printing away over there. It's a very desirable and beautiful art form.
All right, John, could you give us a little explanation on the history of this big machine you got cranked up here?
This machine is a Chandler & Price Platen letterpress, hand-fed letterpress. It was built in 1912.
And you're just putting the date on this now?
Yes, what I'm doing is these are our bookmarks that we give away during the fair, and I pre-printed what we call shells. So I pre-printed the information and our images on there. And now I'm just coming back and putting the date, the year, so we can cut them up and hand them out.
You can stop at the Minnesota Newspaper Museum, and they'll see you hard at work here?
Me or some other hard-working pressman printing all our giveaways. We give away postcards, we give away pads, we give away bookmarks, and there are people that come here every year that collect these items, and they're one of the first ones in our door, and they're looking to collect their bookmarks to add to all the other ones we have done in the years past. They always want to see us printing the right year on their bookmarks, and we always do. Devil is a young person in the printing shop, and they would do all the grunt work.
As they work their way up. Now you can control the speed that he's going at here.
Absolutely. It's a setting you start with. You reach on the other side and you can control the speed. He's a little printer's devil. We're just breaking him in our shop, and we don't want him to lose any fingers or anything that would close us down. So
we can't have that.
He has a lot of fingers, though.
And who is this gentleman we're working with today?
This is Ben Newpower.
Ben, you're doing a great job. Are you looking for a future in printing?
That was a big I don't know.
John, how do these old presses actually print?
And a platen press has two areas. It has the form bed that we have the form on here that we print off of. And then it has the feed platen that feeds the paper in. We put ink up on the ink disc. I'll put a little white ink on here. This ink disc rotates every time the press cycles, and that distributes the ink out evenly over the ink disc. The rollers come up over the ink disc, get a thin layer of ink, and they roll it down over the surface of our form, which press printing. Letters are pressed into the paper. Ink is distributed from the rollers to the form to the paper. Pretty basic stuff. I am cutting some cardstock down into our postcard stock that we print on the platen press, but I'm cutting them on a guillotine paper cutter, very sharp. We put our paper in here. We have a back plate that we can move back and forth, and a ruler embedded in here. We want to cut this 8.5 paper down to 5.5, so we put that right on the 5.5 mark. We spin the clamp down. That puts a heavy weight on our paper. And then you just come forward, step back just a little bit. Oh, there you go. Cuts a nice even cut on there. You don't want to leave your hand in there, which you won't. So then we cut that down a little further.
That's now how old is this machine?
This machine is about 1940.
A classic.
One of the great things about this place is that we have attracted a number of very talented people over the years. I'd like to introduce you to Mark Diggory. Mark is our operations coordinator and our afternoon manager. The awesome thing about Mark is that he has taught himself how to operate all of these machines over the years. Today I'm going to let Mark tell you about the Linotype, because he's figured out how to run this thing, and he knows a bit about the history of it as well.
Hey, Mark, if people come to the Minnesota Newspaper Museum here, they're also going to see this historic machine. Could you tell us a little bit about this trademark, the Linotype?
Yeah, this machine is made by the Mergenthaler Linotype Company. Mergenthaler was the inventor of the Linotype back in the 1880s. And this machine, however, is a later model. It's built in 1960.
Okay.
So it has many features that earlier machines didn't have.
Mark, now a major newspaper like the Minneapolis Tribune, how many of these machines would be operating for a daily newspaper?
Well, according to one of our volunteers who was a Linotype machinist at Star Tribune, there were 42
for a daily
42
newspaper.
machines running at Star and Tribune Company.
Wow, that's amazing. So this was a whole other era. When did this era come to an end?
It was a gradual process beginning in about the 1960s and running through the 70s. We have type standing here from the Minneapolis Star from 1976, which was within a few months of the end of the use of linotypes at the Star and Tribune.
For about 100 years, this was the baby. This is where it all happened.
That's right. Okay, this is a matrix. Each matrix has got a mold for one letter. Now I can choose whether to use a regular or a boldface. I can mix those in a line of type. And when it's done molding the line of type, it puts the matrix away automatically using a key which is on the top. Each matrix has got a different combination of teeth on the top. And okay, I'm going to put this on the bar up here. The first section of the bar has got teeth in all of the positions. It's carried across another bar by a screw. That bar has got a different combination every 1/4 of an inch. And when it finds the right one, it falls off. And I will first demonstrate setting a line of type. And okay. Now it's casting the line. The slug will come out here. That's the product. We make one line of type. So it's called a linotype machine.
All right, Mark, moving on. Now we have some blocks with information on them. Could you tell us what this process is about?
Well, there's various different techniques for producing a printing surface that you can use to make a picture in a newspaper. We've got a stereotype here. This is cast as one solid piece of lead.
Now, these are old time stuff.
These are old time.
How far back would this go?
Let's go back into the late 1800s.
Oh, wow. There you go.
There are acid-etched engravings made on zinc. Also copper. We've got things called electrotypes.
Okay.
Now these are photo engravings made on magnesium. These are, for this year's edition, we had them done by St. Cloud Engraving in St. Cloud, Minnesota. Yeah, these are all photographs, and we've also got line cuts that are used for advertisements, cartoons, and so on.
So, Mark, what are these indentations? How does this highlight work?
Well, all of the raised areas are going to get inked, and then paper will be pressed on them and print. Anything that's a low area on the block is going to be a white space. In the case of photographs, the dimples are very tiny, but they're still there, and they make the white dots in the photograph.
All right, Mark, now we have, what's this, page 2 of a project that you're actually at work on?
This is page 2 of this year's Maynard News. It's in the process of being made up. It's mostly complete, but we've got a few areas to fill here before we can lift it up and put it on the press.
And these are the blocks that we were looking at previously.
Yeah, here's a line cut. There's a half tone. We also have got type in here. Headlines are hand-set type. Each letter is one piece of metal. And then we've got lines, rows and rows of linotype.
Richard A. Claddy here with Morgan Hiscox, who was at the development of this project that started, 3 years ago, Morgan?
It was 3 years ago. It was my first year as a volunteer here at the museum, and it was the 30-year anniversary of the museum being here at the fair, and we wanted to do something special. And I, being the new kid, suggested that maybe we do a commemorative poster, and everyone liked that idea, and I upped the ante by suggesting that maybe it be a color poster.
Now, as I understand, for years and years, dating way back, this was just a black and white machine that just put out black and white posters.
Absolutely. This Mealy Pony only printed black ink, and it only printed the newspaper. So I was asking for a lot of trust. It was myself.
Where did you get this? Where did you three ladies get the crazy idea that you could do something with color on here?
We had done that in other shops. The three of us have worked in letterpress printing for a number of years. And Jenny Undis was a woman that has been a long-time volunteer and was previously my boss at a company called Lunalux Letterpress and Design. It was on Loring Park. And Allison Coward has worked at a number of different binderies and things. She's very well experienced. She is my age as well. And with plenty of skepticism and reluctancy, they let us
I imagine
try
some
it.
of the old timers here probably thought you were a little off the wall with that
I think everyone
idea.
thought we'd make a huge mess and not clean it up and not yield a very good product. But alas, we did, and they were impressed, and they've let us do it 2 more times, and now it's a commemorative thing.
It's kind of a hit now.
It is. People come for it.
Now, what you're talking about is this is the First Amendment poster.
Yes. This is the background layer, and so it's all handset wood type. It's all from the Lunalux type collection. So we set it elsewhere and brought it here. This is about 30 or 40 hours of work just to get it set up, just to get the form locked up, which is what's here on the table here in front of us. We print it with a split fountain, which is how you get that beautiful gradient. So the fountain at the end of the press, which was always just black ink, has multiple colors next to each other, and then they blend as the press runs. So after we are printing all of the backgrounds so that we can print the second layer over top, and then we will cut them in half so they're rolled to be a more kind of carryable size for fairgoers. So we want everybody to come and get as much stuff as they can for their free giveaways. So the big sheet's a bit cumbersome, but hopefully folks will want to take some of those too if they'd like. We'll allow that. But I am currently working on setting up the second form, which is it's the black type over top, which is one form, but it'll act as 2 posters. So we've got a couple typos to work out before we get that printed, but it's on press, so we can turn that on and show you what that looks like. So when setting any type of letterpress form, all of the figures and the letters are backwards, and you set it upside down and backwards. So with enough experience, you learn to see all of that as you're setting it, and it gets easier as you practice. So when sending this form through the press, it will become inked by the rollers, and when the paper meets it, it then is a mirror image, so it will be right reading once it has gone through the press.
Okay, but we're going to take a look at this machine revved up, and are you printing up some posters now?
We will. We'll run a few sheets through so you can see how it works.
All right, let's check that out.
So this press is our Mealy Pony. It's from 1924, just used for the newspaper up until now. We will be running the second form, which will be the black form over top of the backgrounds, which is in the press right now. We've got a Thomas Jefferson quote, and then we have set the First Amendment again.
What are you doing there? You gotta fine tune this thing.
I am adjusting the gripper, the guides rather, so that when the grippers, the timing needs to be exactly right. These need to lift when the grippers come around to grab the sheet, and if they are not perfectly timed, then they nick the edge of the.
All right, we're gonna try again. We can't have nicks in those things. These are collector items. Michelle, tell us a little bit more about the Maynard News.
The Maynard News is our publication that we create every year at the Minnesota State Fair. But when I say at the Minnesota State Fair, I'm not telling the entire story, because we actually come out for at least 2 to 3 weeks prior to the fair to go through the whole process that you've been observing earlier today. Our news philosophy for the content is pretty centered toward journalism, the newspaper industry, and also around things that relate to the museum and that relate to our volunteers or our staff or even the Minnesota State Fair. The 2019 edition that we're working on right now, we do have a feature in it about the new development on the north end of the fairgrounds. And we also have a couple of features on some volunteers. So it really is, it's meant to educate, to inform, and to entertain our visitors.
Leonard, thank you very much for letting us come into your newspaper museum here on the Minnesota State Fairgrounds. And it was great seeing all these great volunteers and people you have on your staff here.
Well, and thank you for coming out. It is always a pleasure to share what we do around here and to be able to tell our story, because after all, that's what newspapers do best, storytellers.